Well, I got my wish, and there's snow all over, and it came just in time for my birthday too, which was exceptionally great. But it is November, so it's time for another garden tour. November has brought with it not only snow, but it has brought a roller coaster of weather. So this month we started it off with our first frost, which ended up killing off the dahlias. So I was able to remove the pots and dig up the tubers out of the garden bed and get those dealt with. They're in a bag in the basement. They aren't actually dealt with because who's got time for that? But they got taken out of the garden at least. After we had our frost, we ended up having this crazy heat wave where we were out in t-shirts again. And with that heat wave, I was able to put out all of the Christmas decorations and Christmas lights and get those mounted up on the house, and was able to plant in a few more bulbs and put my garlic in as well. And if you haven't checked out about planting garlic, then make sure to check out my last video, which I'll leave linked down below, where we talk about it's not too late in Southern Ontario. Even though there's snow on the ground, give it like another week, it's gonna thaw out again. You can still get garlic and bulbs into the ground here in Ontario, at least Southern Ontario. So after we had our crazy mild spell, then we got storms, and oh man, we got wicked, wicked storms. Like it downed trees, uprooted the entire root balls on them, and it was a wicked, wicked storm. And then that ended up bringing in snow. So we've had a little bit of everything, and I'm very, very pleased that we got the snow. We got to build some snowmen already in the garden. We've spent quite a bit of time out here in the snow, and we have loved every minute of it. But that means that the garden is also starting to look a little bit different. November is that kind of weird transition phase where you still have foliage, but you also have snow, and some things are completely dying and other things are still green, and the garden really doesn't quite know what to do with itself. But we're gonna just take a little wander and explore what is happening here in my garden, and it will give you a pretty good sense of what happens in a garden in Southern Ontario, and you can use that to then plan for four-season interest in your garden. So we've still had things blooming a little unseasonably late. Our dianthus is still pumping out blooms here, also the one that is in my blueberry barrel by the front door. It has still been pumping out blooms, and my balloon bellflower had also popped out a new bloom on that, which was really quite surprising. The dianthus is normally, it blooms all season long, but I've never had it bloom this late into the season. Typically my roses would be blooming this late, and this year they stopped on me and they haven't given out anything new for the month of November. But we do still have winter interest. The Viburnum was a late one for changing color, and I love watching this as the winter months progress because it puts out its flower buds in the, I guess around September, October is when you start to notice them, and those will then bloom the following spring. So I like to count them up in the fall, and it just gives me that little glimmer of hope to get us through, and also hopefully that they don't get some crazy frost to kill them off. But they look like little Yoda heads, and it has been pumping up more and more every single year. I guess last spring I had around 12 or so flower buds on it, and the spring before that I think I only had 1 or 2 flower buds. And this year it looks like we have quite a few more, but I haven't gone in and actually counted them up yet. I normally wait for all the leaves to fall off, but the foliage on this has been beautiful. Viburnums tend to have some pretty nice fall color, and it's not where the whole leaf will change into an orange or a yellow or a red. Instead, it gets this kind of ombre effect in the middle where you get yellow and red, and around the outside you get a perimeter of green, and some of them even get more purpley hues, and they have some really pretty coloring. So some of the leaves got that really nice coloring, other leaves went almost completely red, and some leaves just stayed green, but it did give some nice leafy variety. Some of the other variety for a leaf that really played off nicely on each other was my purple leaf sand cherry and my mock orange. The mock orange went a really vibrant yellow, and the purple leaf sand cherry had this like burgundy glow to it. It's normally a burgundy color throughout the year, but when the fall sunshine hit it, it was literally glowing from within. It was beautiful. And the two of them side by side was a really nice matchup. I was really quite happy with that pairing. It's kind of like when the mock orange is in bloom next to the peony. That was another match that I didn't necessarily think through when I was putting them together that ended up working out really quite nice. This was another pairing that I really enjoyed. I've left most of the seed heads. I don't really do any of the garden cleanup like I had mentioned last month, but the seed heads for this space here will end up feeding a bunch of the birds, specifically the finches, as we go through winter. But one thing I did not anticipate and found out yesterday and the day before was that the liatris and the coneflowers make really great accessories for snowmen. So we use the liatris for a nose instead of a carrot, and with its little stem, it's so much easier to poke into a snowball. And the coneflowers make awesome eyes and buttons. So who would have thought? But they are a great little crafting spot for your garden. Over against the trellis there, or the arch rather, we have the Mugel Pine, and that's another one that gives some really nice winter interest, and the little birds will actually come and hide underneath it sometimes when there's storms. And evergreens are great for providing shelter for birds. I have one evergreen in a pot that originally had intentions of being planted out in the lawn here to give that, and I just never got around to planting it, and I really like having it in the pot. It's like a little Christmas tree that I can move around, and I don't think I'm actually going to plant it. I think I'm going to take it with me. It's a Japanese umbrella pine, so kind of like a ginkgo. It's like a dinosaur when it comes to trees. It's from a completely different era and is a bit of a relic, and it's a very cool, unusual sort of pine tree when you look at the way that the needles are formed on it. And I've been really happy. It's a very slow growing tree, so it is well suited to a pot in that sense, but it's not supposed to be that hardy. Like, we're kind of on the cusp for hardiness for it. And especially having it in a pot, you would think that that would actually cause some issues, and it has overwintered beautifully for me for the last 3 years. So I've been doing that, and it's sitting by the front door all decorated out for Christmas, and it will probably continue to be so moving forward. But another winter interest in this zone is the dogwood. This is that red stemmed shrub that some dogwoods are really very pretty with variegated foliage throughout the year. Other ones are kind of unassuming, but once they drop their leaves in the fall and the winter, then they start to shine. There are ones with yellow twigs and ones with red. I have the red osier dogwood. So it has the very, very vibrant red stems with kind of little white flecks on it, and it will get quite a bit bigger. My garden is still a very juvenile garden, and it provides lovely winter interest. Now, moving over a little bit further over here, my redbud has grown exponentially this year, and one thing I'm noticing on it is that it appears to have a whole bunch of little buds all over it, and I'm really hoping that that is a sign that this spring we're finally going to get blooms on this, because we have not yet had any blooms pop out on this baby. It takes 3 to 4 years before it will bloom, and I didn't know that when I put it in. So it's been a very unassuming little tree, but it has been working really hard growing, getting nice, big and strong. And so I'm really hopeful that this coming spring we finally get that show of beautiful pink flowers. And then that means next winter we would also have more winter interest, because it begins to have these little seed pods that dangle down from it, and they get a very full covering of that, and it can be quite pretty and give some nice winter interest for there. Like I mentioned, my roses are pretty well toast for this time of year, so what I will probably end up doing is just coming in and trimming those guys up just to protect them from any winter damage from getting blown around. But otherwise, really no other maintenance going on in this section at all. The clematis over on my archway here, it has its little Dr. Seuss seed pods, and it looks so pretty when the sun ends up hitting it. But otherwise, it's also gone brown and kind of blah. But down by the road here, this is where the fun has begun. So this here we had as a play structure for my daughter at the beginning of the year. I had pruned it up from our apple tree out back in February, made a little teepee for her in March, and then in the summer we used it as a vegetable trellis, and then for October I turned it into a ghost, and now it is a Christmas tree. And she has been coming out here in the evenings when the lights come on and playing underneath it as long as she can, which has just made my heart so very happy to see how much fun she's having with the Christmas display. So this has been such a great toy, such a great tool for the garden, and all of it was reclaimed materials. and it has just been such a practical piece. I did not expect to get quite this much use out of it, and I'm so glad that I had made this last spring. Now the burning bush over here has now dropped all of its leaves. It's looking quite bare and dull. This one is also still fairly new to my garden space, but moving forward as it matures, it's going to begin to have berries. And this year was actually a really good year in Southern Ontario for the entire euonymus family. They all have really crazy berries that people who didn't even realize that they got berries or that they bloomed, all of a sudden were like, we have berries. And this one doesn't have too many, like I just have just a few in here that are hanging on, which it's nothing to speak about at all. But moving forward, this also will have some winter interest until, of course, the birds clear it out, and then there won't be anything left. So over in this zone, probably the biggest thing to notice is that our fairy garden has moved indoors for the winter. We decided that it would probably be best to put it in the garage, especially after that crazy windstorm that we got. It just didn't feel worth it leaving it out here to overwinter. And we still have flowers underneath all of this snow and all of this ice. The pansies are still blooming strong, and this is what I absolutely love about pansies. These were all planted in the spring. I have done nothing to them. They have gone all spring, all summer, all fall, and now even into the snow in the winter, we still have, oops, as I crushed them all, we still have flowers. So they are a really low maintenance, easy annual that just thrives in our area. And I prefer the cooler tones that a lot of the pansies come in versus the warmer tones of geraniums. But I love pansies. They were one of the first plants that I ever planted as a kid as well, so I love them. The climbing rose and the lavender, I mound them up normally with a little bit of mulch to help get them through winter, but there was already a good amount of mulch from what I had put down in the spring, so I haven't done anything additional to those. And then over in this zone here, it's really, everything has just kind of died back and faded now, except for the muscari. The muscari is a spring bulb, and I had added more to the garden space because I love it. It's also known as Grape Hyacinth, and it begins to sprout up in around October. Well, maybe even sooner, maybe in September, you'll start to notice the greens coming up, and it will stay green all winter long, and then we'll have its bloom in early spring. So I have all sorts of new leafy green shoots all over this area here, and it is going to stay like that, which is always such a nice treat to not have it just completely devoid of any green. But this zone here will have a little bit of green foliage popping through. And the blueberry barrel, I had popped in some garlic into that, and the dianthus are still blooming, and I had also put in some more daffodils into that zone there because the bulbs seem to be doing, for the hyacinths at least, really well overwintering in it. So I want to push the boundaries of that barrel just a little bit further. So that is the front yard. Let's hop into the back and we'll take a quick little tour back there. Well, back here it is a disaster zone, and this is where the dogs take over this time of year. It becomes a bit of a mud pit. The puppy has figured out where I stash the plants that don't fit into the compost, and so he has been hauling out all of the peppers that I had put in there, and just, he is so proud of his little victims when he gets them. He runs around, heaven forbid if you try and catch him. He also ended up uprooting my rosemary, digging through my parsley and my chamomile. He was on top of the grow bags. So it looks like, because I don't think we're going to be out here correcting much of his behavior over the winter, because really who wants to be doing that? Next spring I'm probably going to have to do a bit of puppy proofing around the garden if anything is going to be expected to survive, because he's not going to be getting any smaller, and he's very mischievous, very, very mischievous. So I guess jumping into it, what have we done back here? I didn't get around to putting away all my plastic pots, but they still need to go away. That way they don't get damaged and crack over the winter months. The apple tree, it kind of, in spring, it did a really lackluster, very quick display. It had its buds and it was bud, 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 bud. It bloomed and it was over. Where the previous year we got a really nice display. its fall display ended up doing the exact same thing. It was green, 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 green. It turned yellow, and like the next day it dropped everything. It didn't hang around. It didn't give us very much of a show-stopping sort of piece. So this year it was kind of lackluster. But all of the leaves have fallen down now, and so I'm not cleaning those up. I'm going to keep them around and make use of them for compost and possibly even some mulch in certain areas depending on what I decide to do next spring. And they tend to blow into this kind of patio area anyway. And that's actually something to keep in mind, and I'm going to be covering in an upcoming video, is microclimates and watching for your wind patterns and the leaves. So a little tidbit there. Gutter gardens are just collecting the snow. Grass is turning into mud, and in my grow bags back here, I put some of the garlic into these, and I still have to cover these over with some more straw. And the strawberries have continued to bloom. I still have flowers. I still even have some baby fruits that decided to try and give one last hurrah. So this I also have to top up with some more straw to help get through the winter with that. This really does get a little bit boring as the winter months go on, and it just becomes a jungle gym for these guys. So for the rest of my garden tour videos, because I have been doing these every single month, make sure to click this video up over here. And we just have 1 month left to go, and we will have covered the entire year of 2020. So hopefully that is helpful and insightful to you for planning for 4-season blooms and seasonal interest for your Canadian garden. What are you doing?